I was 15 minutes late getting home from my shift at the car rental lot when Michelle Carlson appeared in my driveway like she had been waiting in the cold just to ambush me. She had a clipboard, black earmuffs clamped over her ears, and that purple wool coat she wore like armor. I live in Kansas City, Kansas, in a lakefront community called Summerlin Meadows, where every dock and water view turns into a legal battle, and Michelle ran the vendor coordination for the HOA like it was her personal fiefdom. I had moved here 6 months ago because the rent was cheaper than the city, and I needed the commute to stay under 30 minutes. I could not afford to miss shifts. The lot ran 24/7, and if I was not there to process returns and handle the key drop, someone else would be, and my manager had made it clear my hours were not guaranteed. The HOA had been quiet for the first few months. Then the letters started. Parking violations, trash can placement, a complaint about my mailbox flag being crooked. But this was different. Michelle was holding a bright yellow plastic ruler in her other hand. She said, "You have snow chains in your trunk. I saw them when you opened it this morning. That indicates commercial driving activity, and it is a direct violation of the residential use covenant. I am documenting this for the file." I said, "Those are for emergencies. I drive a rear-wheel sedan and the roads get bad here." She said, "The covenants are clear. No commercial vehicle storage or operation. If you are using chains, you are operating a commercial vehicle. I can have security walk you out if you refuse to comply." I stared at her. Security. We had one guy who drove around twice a week checking for trash cans left out past noon. I said, "I work at a car rental lot. I do not drive customers anywhere. The chains are for my personal car in case I get stuck on the way to work." She tapped the ruler against the clipboard. She said, "That is your story. I have already submitted the initial notice. You have 72 hours to remove the chains and provide proof of compliance, or we move to the next step." I asked what the next step was. She smiled and said, "Fines. Then a lien if you continue to ignore the process. Then we reset the deadlines and you start over. Most people give up after the second reset." That night I went through every piece of mail the HOA had sent me. There were 9 letters total. 3 were about my trash cans being 6 inches over the curb line. 2 were about my mailbox flag. 1 was about tire marks on the grass near my driveway. 1 was about a holiday wreath I had hung in November that apparently violated the decor timeline. The other 2 were duplicate notices claiming I had missed deadlines, but the dates did not match the originals. I took pictures of everything with my phone and backed them up to cloud storage. Then I searched the neighborhood Facebook group. I was not the only one. A guy named Ron posted about getting fined for having his boat trailer in his driveway for 4 hours while he loaded gear. Someone else complained about a lien threat over a trash can. A woman said Michelle had tried to get her towed for parking in a guest spot during the day. The pattern was clear. Michelle picked targets, and she did not let go. The next morning I was pulling out of my driveway at 5:30 for the early shift when I saw Michelle standing on the sidewalk in front of my house. It was still dark. She had a flashlight and the yellow ruler. She crouched down and pressed the ruler into the snow on the sidewalk, then stood up and took a picture with her phone. I rolled down my window and said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Measuring snow depth. You are required to clear your sidewalk within 12 hours of snowfall. We had 3 inches yesterday afternoon and your sidewalk still has 2.4 inches of compacted snow. I am documenting this for the file." I said, "I shoveled it last night at 10. She said, "Not well enough. The standard is bare pavement or treated surface. This is compacted snow and it is a liability. I will be adding this to your open case." I sat there with the engine running and watched her move to the next section of my sidewalk and measure again. She did it 3 more times, each time taking a picture and writing something on the clipboard. I was going to be late if I did not leave right then. I drove past her and she did not even look up. At work I called the HOA management company. The woman on the phone said my account showed 2 open violations and a pending fine schedule. I said I wanted to dispute both. She said I needed to submit a written dispute within 10 days of the original notice. I said I never got an original notice for the commercial vehicle claim. She put me on hold for 6 minutes, then came back and said the notice was mailed on the 15th and the dispute window closed on the 25th. It was the 28th. I said that was only 13 days, and she said the postmark date counted as day 1. I asked for a supervisor. She said supervisors do not handle violation disputes, and I would need to attend the next board meeting. The next meeting was in 3 weeks. I hung up and called my neighbor Ron. He answered on the first ring and said, "Let me guess. Snow chains." I said, "How did you know?" He said, "She did the same thing to me last year with a toolbox in my truck bed. Claimed it was commercial equipment. I had to get a lawyer to write a letter, and even then she kept sending notices. She finally stopped when I filed a police report for harassment." I asked if the report did anything. He said not really, but he had the incident number and he mentioned it every time she came near his property. He said, "You need to start building a file. Pictures, dates, copies of everything. She is going to escalate, and you need proof that she is targeting you." That night I printed every email and letter and put them in a binder. I added the photos from my phone and wrote a timeline. Then I checked the neighborhood group again. There was a new post from someone named Erica. She said, "Does anyone else feel like Michelle only goes after certain people? I have had my trash cans out late a dozen times and never got a letter, but my neighbor got fined twice in 1 month." The comments filled up fast. Someone said Michelle had a leaked email list of people she did not like and she used it to pick targets. Someone else said they had seen her taking pictures of cars in the middle of the night. Another person said she had tried to get the HOA to ban all work trucks, even personal vehicles, and the board voted it down, but she ignored the vote and kept writing notices anyway. I was reading through the thread when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I did not recognize. It said, "This is Erica from the neighborhood group. I saw your comment about the snow chains. I have a drone and I fly it sometimes to check my roof. I caught footage of Michelle measuring your sidewalk this morning. Do you want a copy?" I called her immediately. She said she lived 2 streets over and she had been dealing with Michelle for a year. She said, "I started flying the drone because I needed proof she was trespassing on my property. I have hours of footage. She does this to about 6 or 7 families. The rest of the neighborhood she leaves alone." I asked why. Erica said, "I think she just does not like certain people. Maybe we complained about her once, or maybe we did not vote the way she wanted in a board election. I do not know. But she is obsessed. She keeps that ruler in her car and I have seen her measure sidewalks at 6 in the morning. I asked if she could send me the footage. She said she would email it tonight. Then she said, "Be careful. She has pulled people into disputes that lasted months. She weaponizes the process. She will reset your deadlines, claim you missed hearings, add fees without telling you." I know someone who ended up with a $1,500 legal fee on their account and they never even got a hearing. The footage arrived at 11 that night. It was shot from about 50 feet up and showed Michelle on my sidewalk with the ruler and flashlight. The timestamp was 5:28 in the morning. You could see her crouch, measure, stand, take a picture, move 5 feet, and repeat. She did it 8 times on my property, then walked to the next house and did not measure anything. Just kept walking. I saved the file and backed it up 3 places. The next day I got an email from the management company. It said my dispute had been reviewed and denied because I missed the filing window. It also said a $50 late fee had been added to my account, and I now had a second open violation for the sidewalk snow depth. If I did not clear both within 10 days, a lien packet would be prepared. I printed the email and added it to the binder. Then I checked the management company portal online. My account page said I had 3 open violations. The third one was new. It said I had parked in a guest spot on the 26th. I had not parked in a guest spot. I had been at work. I took a screenshot and added it to the file. That afternoon I was pulling into my driveway after my shift when I saw Michelle standing next to my mailbox with a man in a reflective vest. He had a camera and he was taking pictures of my car. I parked and got out. I said, "What is this?" Michelle said, "This is the HOA inspector. We are documenting your vehicle for the commercial use violation. I am documenting this for the file." I said, "You cannot just bring someone onto my property to take pictures of my car." The man said, I am on the street. This is public right-of-way. I looked at Michelle. I said, "You are harassing me. You measured my sidewalk at 5 in the morning. You are adding fake violations to my account. You are making up parking violations that never happened." She smiled. She said, "If you feel that way, you can dispute it at the board meeting. But you missed the last filing window, so you will need to wait for the next cycle. That resets your deadlines. You should receive the updated notice in about a week." I said, "That is not how disputes work. You cannot just reset deadlines every time someone pushes back." She said, "I can have security walk you out if you continue to be disruptive." The inspector finished taking pictures and handed Michelle a tablet. She tapped the screen a few times, then said, "You will receive a follow-up notice about the findings. Have a good day." They walked away. I stood there in my driveway with snow melting into my boots and my hands shaking. I checked my watch. I had 1 hour before the vendor was supposed to show up to fix the siding on the back of my house. The HOA had sent me a violation notice 3 months ago about a loose panel, and I had finally scheduled the repair. I needed witnesses present when the vendor arrived because I knew Michelle would find a way to claim I missed the repair window or hired an unapproved contractor. I texted Ron and asked if he could come over. He said he would be there in 10 minutes. Then I texted Erica and asked if she could be there too. She said yes. Ron showed up first. He said, "You look like you are about to lose it." I said, "She is trying to bury me. Fake violations, reset deadlines, random inspections. I cannot keep up." He said, "That is the point. She wants you to give up or sell. I have seen her do this to 3 families. 2 of them moved. The 3rd one got a lawyer and she finally backed off, but it cost them thousands." Erica arrived a few minutes later. She had her phone and said, "I can record everything if you want, just in case she shows up and tries to claim something happened that did not." The vendor pulled up right at 4. He was a guy in his 50s with a truck full of tools. He looked at the loose panel, said it would take 30 minutes, and got to work. I stood on the driveway with Ron and Erica and watched. 15 minutes later, Michelle appeared. She had the clipboard and the ruler. She said, "Who approved this contractor?" I said, "I submitted the approval form 6 weeks ago. You have it on file." She said, "I do not see an approval in the system. If you hired an unapproved vendor, that is another violation. I am documenting this for the file." Erica held up her phone. She said, "I am recording this. You are on camera right now claiming he did not submit an approval form. If that is not true, this is evidence of harassment." Michelle stared at her. Then she said, "Recording someone without consent is illegal in Kansas." Erica said, "Kansas is a one-party consent state. I am a party to this conversation. Keep talking." Michelle turned and walked back toward the street. She did not say anything else, but I saw her take pictures of the vendor truck and the license plate. The vendor finished 20 minutes later, handed me an invoice, and left. I took pictures of the repaired panel and the invoice and added them to the file. That night I went through the management company portal again. My account now showed 4 open violations. The new one said I had an unapproved contractor on site on the 29th. I took a screenshot and checked my email. There was a message from the management company with the subject line, "Lien Preparation Notice." It said that due to multiple unresolved violations and missed deadlines, a lien packet was being prepared and I had 10 days to resolve all open issues or the lien would be filed. The total amount listed was $2,300. I read it twice. The breakdown showed $50 per violation, plus legal fees, plus administrative fees, plus late fees. None of it made sense. The amounts did not match anything I had been told before. I called the management company the next morning. The same woman answered. I said I just got a lien notice for $2,300. I was never told the fees would be this high. She said, "The fee schedule is in the covenant documents. You agreed to it when you moved in." I said, "I want an itemized breakdown of every fee and the authorization for each one." She said, "That information is available in your account portal." I said, "It is not. I have screenshots. There is no breakdown." She put me on hold. When she came back, she said, I am showing that your account has been flagged for non-compliance and the board has authorized escalated fees. If you want to dispute, you need to attend the board meeting. I said, the next board meeting is in 2 weeks and you are threatening a lien in 10 days. That does not give me time to dispute anything. She said, you can request an emergency hearing, but there is a $200 filing fee. I hung up. I was 15 minutes late for my shift and my manager sent me a text asking where I was. I got in the car and drove. On the way I called Ron and told him about the lien notice. He said, that is exactly what she did to me. She piles on fees until you cannot afford to fight it. You need to go to the board meeting and you need to bring every piece of paper you have. And you need a lawyer. I said, I cannot afford a lawyer. He said, then you need to get loud. Post everything in the neighborhood group. Make it public. She hates being called out in front of people. At work, I logged into the neighborhood Facebook group and posted the lien notice. I did not use Michelle's name, but I said the HOA vendor coordinator is targeting specific residents with fake violations and bogus fees. I have proof of harassment, falsified violation reports, and illegal fee stacking. If this has happened to you, comment below. We need to organize. The post blew up. Within 2 hours, there were 40 comments. People shared their own stories. Someone said Michelle had tried to fine them for having a garden hose visible from the street. Someone else said she had claimed their mailbox was the wrong color, even though it was the same color as every other mailbox in the neighborhood. A woman said Michelle had threatened to tow her car while she was unloading groceries. Another person said they had received a lien notice and paid it just to make Michelle go away, but later found out the fees were never authorized by the board. Then someone named Mark commented and said, I used to be on the board. Michelle does not have the authority to authorize legal fees. Only the board can do that. If she is adding fees without board approval, that is fraud. I messaged Mark privately. He said he had been on the board for 3 years and left because Michelle made it impossible to get anything done. He said she would submit vendor invoices that did not match the approved budgets. She would add line items for legal consultations that never happened. When we questioned her, she would claim it was all authorized by the management company. But the management company always said it came from her. It was a loop. No one wanted to deal with it, so they just approved everything. I asked if he had proof. He said he might still have some old emails. He would check. That night I got another email from the management company. It said my account access had been suspended due to a security review. I could no longer log into the portal. I took a screenshot of the suspension notice and posted it in the neighborhood group. I said, they locked me out of my account the same day I posted about the bogus fees. This is retaliation. Erica commented and said, I have been locked out too. I tried to log in this morning and it said my account was under review. Ron commented and said, same here. This is coordinated. Mark commented and said, this is illegal. You have a right to access your account information. If they are blocking you to prevent you from disputing fees, that is a violation of state HOA law. You need to file a complaint with the Kansas Attorney General. I had never filed a complaint with the Attorney General. I did not even know that was an option. I looked up the process. It required a written complaint with supporting documents. I started putting together a packet. I included the lien notice, the screenshots of the portal lockout, the drone footage, the timeline, and copies of every email and letter. It took me 3 hours. I submitted it online at midnight. The next morning I woke up to a text from Erica. It said, check your mailbox. I went outside. There was a notice taped to my mailbox. It said I was in violation of the parking policy for having a vehicle with commercial markings in my driveway. I looked at my car. There were no commercial markings. It was a plain sedan. I took a picture of the notice and the car and posted it in the group. I said, this is what retaliation looks like. There are no commercial markings. She is just making things up now. The comments came fast. Someone said, she is spiraling. She knows people are organizing and she is trying to shut it down. Someone else said, do not back down. She is counting on you to give up. Another person said, you need to go to the board meeting and bring everyone. Make it a public spectacle. She cannot ignore 20 people. I decided to go to the board meeting early and sit in the front row. I wanted to be visible. I wanted Michelle to see me. The meeting was at 7 in the evening at the community clubhouse. I got there at 6:30. There were already 15 people in the room. Most of them were from the neighborhood group. Ron was there. Erica was there. Mark was there. A few others I recognized from their profile pictures. We sat together in the front 2 rows. Michelle arrived at 6:50. She saw us and her face went tight. She sat at the board table and opened her laptop. The board president, a man named David, came in a few minutes later. He looked tired. He sat down and said, "We have a full agenda tonight, so let us keep comments brief." I raised my hand. David said, "We will get to public comments after the standard business." The standard business took 40 minutes. Budget reports, landscaping updates, a discussion about holiday light rules. I watched Michelle the whole time. She kept glancing at our group. She was tapping her pen on the table. Finally, David said, "Public comments. 3 minutes per person. Who wants to start?" I stood up. I said, "My name is on file, and I am here to dispute multiple fraudulent violations and a lien notice that includes unauthorized legal fees. I have documentation that shows the vendor coordinator has been targeting specific residents, fabricating violations, and adding fees without board approval. I have submitted a formal complaint to the Kansas Attorney General, and I am requesting that the board launch an internal audit of all fees and violations issued in the past year." Michelle stood up. She said, "That is a serious accusation and it is completely false. Every violation I have issued has been documented and approved according to policy. If you missed deadlines, that is not my fault. I am documenting this for the file." I said, "You locked my account so I could not access the portal. You reset deadlines without notice. You claimed I had an unapproved contractor when I have proof of approval. You measured my sidewalk at 5 in the morning with a ruler. I have drone footage." Erica stood up and held up her phone. She said, "I have the footage. It shows her trespassing on private property and conducting inspections outside of normal hours. It also shows her skipping other properties and only targeting specific houses." David looked at Michelle. He said, "Is this true?" Michelle said, "I conduct inspections as needed. If some properties are in compliance, I do not need to inspect them." Mark stood up. He said, "I was on this board for 3 years. Michelle has been adding legal fees to accounts without board authorization. I have emails that prove it. The management company claims she authorized the fees. She claims the board authorized them. No one is taking responsibility and residents are being charged thousands of dollars for violations that were either fake or improperly processed." David said, "I need to see those emails." Mark said, "I can send them tonight." David looked at Michelle again. He said, "We are going to pause this discussion and move it to a closed session. Everyone else, thank you for your comments. We will follow up." I said, "No. This is a public meeting and we have a right to hear the response." David said, "Closed sessions are allowed under the bylaws for personnel issues." Ron stood up. He said, "This is not a personnel issue. This is fraud. If the board moves this to a closed session, we will assume you are covering for her, and we will make sure the entire neighborhood knows." David looked around the room. There were now about 30 people. Half of them had their phones out recording. He said, "Fine. Michelle, do you have the authorization records for the legal fees?" Michelle said, "They are in the management company files. I do not have access to them right now." David said, "Then we are going to table this until you can produce them. In the meantime, all liens and fee assessments are suspended pending review." Michelle said, "You do not have the authority to suspend fee assessments. That is a management company function." David said, "I am the board president and I am exercising emergency authority. If you have a problem with that, you can file a dispute." Michelle stood up, grabbed her laptop, and walked out. The room was silent for about 5 seconds, then people started clapping. After the meeting, I stood in the parking lot with Ron, Erica, and Mark. Mark said, "She is not going to let this go. She will try to retaliate." I said, "Let her. I have everything documented. If she keeps pushing, I will file a civil suit." Erica said, "You should. But you need a lawyer. This is going to get ugly." Ron said, "I know someone. A guy who specializes in HOA disputes. He does not charge unless you win. I will send you his contact info." I thanked them and drove home. When I got to my driveway, I saw something on the ground near my garage. I got out and looked closer. It was my work gloves. I had left them in my car that morning and now they were on the ground, covered in snow. Someone had taken them out of my car and moved them. I checked the car doors. They were unlocked. I always locked them. I picked up the gloves and went inside. I checked every window and door. Nothing else was missing. It was just the gloves. It felt like a message. The next morning I installed a dash cam in my car and a doorbell camera on my front door. I also put a motion-activated camera in my garage. If someone was coming onto my property, I wanted proof. 2 days later, I got an email from Mark. He said, "I found the emails. I am sending them to you and to the board. You need to see this." The attachment had 15 pages of email threads between Mark, Michelle, the management company, and the board. The pattern was clear. Michelle would submit an invoice for legal fees. The management company would forward it to the board and say it was approved by Michelle. The board would ask Michelle for details. Michelle would say it was approved by the management company. The board would approve it because no one wanted to hold up vendor payments. The fees would get added to resident accounts. No one ever checked if the legal consultations actually happened. I forwarded the emails to the lawyer Ron had recommended. His name was Stephen. He called me that afternoon. He said, "This is textbook fraud. If the board knowingly allowed this to continue, they are liable. If Michelle was acting alone, she is liable. Either way, you have a strong case." I asked what the next step was. He said, "We file a demand letter with the board and the management company. We ask for a full refund of all unauthorized fees and a formal apology. If they refuse, we file a civil suit and we loop in everyone else who was affected. This could be a class action." I said, "How long does that take?" He said, "Months. Maybe a year. But in the meantime, we can get an injunction to stop any further fee assessments or liens. That protects you while the case moves forward." I told him to start the paperwork. That night I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "You are making a mistake. Drop this before it gets worse." I took a screenshot and sent it to Stephen. He said, "That is witness intimidation. Save it. If they keep doing this, we add it to the filing." The next morning I was getting ready for my shift when I heard a truck outside. I looked out the window and saw a tow truck in front of my house. The driver was hooking up my car. I ran outside. I said, "What are you doing?" The driver said, "I have an order to tow this vehicle. Unpaid HOA fees." I said, "That is not legal. The fees are under dispute and there is no lien filed." He said, "I just do what the order says. If you have a problem, call the company." I pulled out my phone and called Stephen. He answered immediately. I said, "They are trying to tow my car right now." He said, "Put me on speaker." I did. Stephen said, "Driver, this is an attorney representing the vehicle owner. The fees referenced in your order are under legal dispute and no lien has been filed. If you proceed with this tow, you are participating in an illegal seizure and you will be named in a civil suit. Do you understand?" The driver stopped. He said, "I need to call my dispatcher." He got on his radio. After about 2 minutes, he unhooked my car and said, "They are pulling the order. Have a good day." I stood there shaking. Stephen said, "They are desperate." That was a Hail Mary. It means they know they are losing. The demand letter went out 3 days later. Stephen sent it to the board, the management company, and Michelle personally. It requested a full accounting of all legal fees charged in the past 2 years, a refund of all unauthorized fees, and a written acknowledgement that the violations against me were improperly issued. It also requested that Michelle be removed from her role as vendor coordinator pending an independent audit. The board responded in 2 days. David sent an email to the entire neighborhood. It said the board had launched an internal review of all fee assessments and vendor authorizations. It said Michelle had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the review. It said any resident with concerns about fees or violations should contact the management company directly to request an audit of their account. The neighborhood group exploded. People posted screenshots of their fee statements. Someone found a pattern. Nearly every legal fee had been added during months when Michelle was the only person submitting vendor invoices. Someone else found that the law firm listed on the invoices did not exist. The address was a mailbox service in a strip mall. The phone number was disconnected. Mark posted, "This was not just targeting. This was organized theft. She was billing fake legal fees and pocketing the money. The management company was complicit because they processed the payments without verifying anything." I called Stephen. I said, "If the law firm is fake, where did the money go?" He said, "That is what the audit will show. If she was invoicing fake fees and the management company was processing them, someone was getting paid. We need to see the bank records." 2 days later, the management company sent an email to all residents. It said the internal review had uncovered irregularities in vendor billing and fee assessments. It said the company was cooperating fully with an independent audit and all affected residents would receive refunds within 60 days. It also said Michelle Carlson was no longer employed by the HOA in any capacity. I waited for the other shoe to drop. It came a week later. The audit report was posted in the management company portal. It was 37 pages long. The summary said Michelle had been submitting fake legal invoices for 18 months. The total amount billed was $83,000. The invoices were processed by the management company and the payments were deposited into a business account that Michelle controlled. She had been using the HOA vendor payment system to funnel money into her own account. The management company had failed to verify any of the invoices because they assumed the board had approved them. The board had failed to verify because they assumed the management company had approved them. No one had checked. The neighborhood group went nuclear. People demanded criminal charges. Someone started a petition to sue the management company. Ron posted, "This is why you never trust the HOA. They do not work for you. They work for themselves." Stephen called me that night. He said, "This is bigger than we thought. The Attorney General is opening a criminal investigation. Michelle could face fraud charges, theft, and racketeering. The management company could face civil penalties for negligence. And the board could be personally liable if they knowingly ignored red flags." I said, "What about my case?" He said, "Your case is solid. We are going to get every dime back plus damages. But you are not the only one. We are organizing a class action. Everyone who paid fake fees is going to be part of it." I asked how many people that was. He said, "At least 40 families. Maybe more. We are still going through the records." The next board meeting was packed. There were over 100 people in the clubhouse. The board had hired a new management company, and they brought a lawyer. David opened the meeting and said, "We know everyone has questions. We are going to address them one at a time. But first, I want to apologize. The board failed to provide adequate oversight. We trusted the wrong people, and we did not verify the information we were given. That stops now." Someone in the back yelled, "You should all resign." David said, "That is your right to request. If you want to recall the board, you can file a petition. But right now, we need to focus on fixing this." The new management company rep stood up. She said, "We have completed a full audit of all accounts. Every family that was charged a fake legal fee will receive a full refund within 30 days. We are also waiving all administrative fees and late fees for the next 6 months. If you have questions about your account, you can schedule a one-on-one meeting with me starting tomorrow." Someone asked, "What about Michelle? Is she going to jail?" The lawyer stood up. He said, "That is a matter for law enforcement. The HOA has provided all records to the Kansas Attorney General. We cannot comment on an ongoing investigation." Erica stood up. She said, "What about the rule changes? Michelle claimed that a bunch of violations were based on rules that were never properly adopted. Is that true?" The lawyer said, "We are reviewing all rule amendments from the past 3 years. Preliminary findings indicate that several amendments were not properly noticed or voted on. Those amendments are being voided. If you received a violation based on a voided rule, that violation is dismissed and any associated fees are refunded. I stood up. I said, "How do we know this will not happen again?" The lawyer said, "The new management company has implemented a dual authorization system. Every invoice over $500 requires approval from 2 board members and verification from the management company. Every fee assessment requires documented evidence and a notice period. Every rule change requires a public hearing and a recorded vote. We are also hiring an independent auditor to review financials quarterly." Ron stood up. He said, "That is great. But what about accountability? The old management company processed fake invoices for 18 months. Are they being held responsible?" The lawyer said, "The board is exploring legal action against the prior management company. That process is ongoing." The meeting lasted 2 more hours. By the end, most people seemed cautiously satisfied. The board had screwed up, but they were trying to fix it. The new management company seemed competent. Michelle was gone. The fake fees were being refunded. It was not perfect, but it was progress. After the meeting, I stood in the parking lot with Ron, Erica, and Mark. Erica said, "I cannot believe she got away with it for so long." Mark said, "She did not get away with it. She is going to face charges. And even if she does not go to jail, her life is over. No HOA will ever hire her. Her reputation is destroyed." Ron said, "Good. She deserves it." I said, "I just want my money back and I want to be left alone." Erica said, "You will be. The new management company does not play games. I already talked to the rep. She said if anyone has a problem, they can call her directly. No more runaround." 3 weeks later, I got a check in the mail. It was for $2,300. The memo line said, "Refund of unauthorized fees." I deposited it the same day. The next day, I got an email from Steven. He said, "The class action is moving forward. We have 63 families signed on. The total claim is $412,000. The management company is trying to settle. We are pushing for full restitution plus punitive damages." I asked what that meant for me. He said, "You will get your share of the settlement plus compensation for the harassment and stress. Probably another few thousand, maybe more." I said, "What about Michelle?" He said, "She has been charged with 15 counts of fraud and theft. Her trial is scheduled for next year. If she is convicted, she is looking at 5 to 10 years. I said, "Good." The winter dragged on. The snow kept coming. I kept shoveling my sidewalk and going to work. The new management company sent monthly updates. The audit was ongoing. More fake invoices were being found. The total kept climbing. By March, it was over $100,000. One night, I was scrolling through the neighborhood group and saw a post from someone I did not recognize. It said, "I used to live in Summerlin Meadows and I moved out 2 years ago because of Michelle. She targeted my family for months. I paid over $3,000 in fake fees just to get her to stop. I had no idea it was fraud. I thought it was just bad luck. Thank you to everyone who stood up and fought back. You saved a lot of people." The comments were full of similar stories. People who had moved. People who had paid fees they could not afford. People who had been harassed and intimidated and driven out. The scope of what Michelle had done was staggering. She had not just targeted a few families. She had built an entire system to extract money from people who did not know how to fight back. I thought about the ruler, that bright yellow plastic ruler she used to measure snow on my sidewalk at 5 in the morning. It was such a small, petty thing, but it was also the thing that made me realize she was not just enforcing rules, she was weaponizing them. She was using the appearance of legitimacy to justify theft and harassment. And she had gotten away with it for years, because most people did not have the time or money or energy to fight. But I had fought. And so had Ron, and Erica, and Mark, and dozens of others. We had called her out. We had documented everything. We had organized. We had refused to back down. And we had won. In April, the settlement was finalized. The management company agreed to pay $650,000 to the class action members. My share was $4,200. Stephen took a third as his fee, so I ended up with $2,800. Combined with the refund, I had just over $5,000. It was not life-changing money, but it was enough to cover the stress and the missed shifts and the hours I had spent building the case. The HOA also agreed to void every rule amendment that Michelle had pushed through without proper notice. That included the commercial vehicle rule, the sidewalk snow depth rule, and about a dozen others. The board published a new policy manual and mailed it to every resident. It was half the size of the old one. Michelle's trial started in June. I did not go. I had said everything I needed to say in my deposition. Stephen kept me updated. The prosecution had phone records, bank statements, email threads, and testimony from over 30 residents. Michelle's defense was that she had been following management company instructions and did not know the fees were fake. The jury did not buy it. She was convicted on 12 counts of fraud and theft. The judge sentenced her to 6 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution. The neighborhood group celebrated. Someone posted a picture of the yellow ruler with the caption, "Never forget." People shared stories about their own encounters with Michelle. The overall mood was relief mixed with anger. Relief that it was over. Anger that it had been allowed to happen in the first place. I did not post anything. I just felt tired. The whole ordeal had taken 8 months from start to finish. 8 months of stress and fear and fighting. 8 months of wondering if I was going to lose my car or my house or my job. 8 months of dealing with fake violations and bogus fees and threats. It had taken a toll. But it was over. And I had won. And that mattered. In July, the new board president sent an email to all residents. It said the HOA was implementing a resident advisory council to provide oversight of management company decisions. It said the council would meet quarterly and all meetings would be open to the public. It said the board was committed to transparency and accountability. It was a nice gesture. I hoped it would last. I kept living in Summerlin Meadows. The neighborhood was quieter now. The Facebook group was less active. People went back to their normal lives. The docks and water views still caused arguments, but they were normal neighbor arguments, not weaponized HOA disputes. I kept the yellow ruler. I found it in the bushes near my mailbox a few weeks after Michelle was arrested. She must have dropped it during one of her early morning inspections. I kept it on my kitchen counter as a reminder. A reminder that systems can be abused. A reminder that silence enables abuse. A reminder that fighting back is worth it, even when it feels impossible. One night in August, I was sitting on my back deck watching the sunset over the lake when Ron walked over. He had a beer in his hand and he handed me one. He said, "You ever think about what would have happened if you had just paid the fees and kept your head down?" I said, "All the time." He said, "You would have been broke and Michelle would still be out there targeting people." I said, "I know." He said, "You did a good thing. A lot of people are better off because you fought." I said, "We all fought. It was not just me." He said, "Yeah, but you started it. You were the first one to stand up in that board meeting and call her out. That gave the rest of us permission to speak up." I did not know what to say to that. I just nodded and drank my beer. Ron said, "You staying here long term?" I said, "I do not know. Depends on work, depends on the HOA, depends on a lot of things." He said, "Fair enough. Well, if you ever need anything, you know where I am." I said, "Same." He walked back to his house, and I sat there watching the light fade over the water. The lake was calm. The air was warm. The neighborhood was quiet. It felt like a different place than it had been 8 months ago. It felt like a place where people could actually live without fear of being targeted or harassed or driven out by someone with a clipboard and a ruler. I thought about the trump card I had held, the invoice trail showing the bogus legal fees. I had waited for the right audience, because the reveal needed witnesses. I had sent it to the board and homeowners at the same time so nobody could bury it. That had been the turning point. That had been the moment when Michelle lost control of the narrative. She could spin individual violations. She could claim residents were misunderstanding the rules, but she could not spin fraud. She could not explain away fake invoices and fake law firms and fake fees. The evidence was too clear. The pattern was too obvious. And the police incident number from the prior trespass attempt had given me credibility. When I forwarded that evidence to the HOA attorney, they immediately backed off. They realized they were dealing with someone who had documentation, who had a history, who was not going to fold under pressure. That had shifted the entire dynamic. I finished my beer and went inside. The yellow ruler was still on the counter. I picked it up and looked at it. It was just a cheap plastic ruler, the kind you could buy at any dollar store. But it had become a symbol of petty tyranny, a symbol of abuse disguised as rule enforcement, a symbol of what happens when power goes unchecked. I put it back on the counter and went to bed. The next morning I woke up to an email from Stephen. It said, "The management company just settled the last of the individual claims. Every family that was affected has been refunded. The total payout was just over $700,000. Michelle is officially bankrupt. The old management company is under investigation by the state. The board has been cleared of criminal liability, but they are facing civil suits from residents who claim negligence. It is going to take years to fully sort out, but the immediate crisis is over." I read the email twice, then deleted it. I did not need to keep thinking about this. It was done. Michelle was in prison. The fees were refunded. The rules were fixed. The new management company was doing its job. The neighborhood was healing. I got dressed and went to work. My shift started at 6, and I needed to process a dozen returns before the morning rush. The lot was busy. The phones were ringing. Customers were arguing about charges. It was a normal day. And that felt good. At lunch I checked the neighborhood group one last time. Someone had posted a picture of a new sign at the entrance to Summerlin Meadows. It said, "Welcome to Summerlin Meadows Community Association," a neighborhood built on trust and accountability. It was cheesy, but it was also true. The neighborhood had been through hell and come out stronger. People were paying attention now. People were asking questions. People were holding the board and the management company accountable. That was the real win. Not the money. Not the conviction. Not even the refunds. The real win was that people had learned they could fight back. They had learned that the system was not invincible. They had learned that silence enabled abuse and noise stopped it. I clocked out at 3 and drove home. The streets were clear. The snow was gone. Spring had turned into summer. The lake was full of boats. Kids were riding bikes. People were mowing their lawns. It looked like a normal neighborhood. And maybe it was. Maybe it always had been, under the surface. Maybe Michelle had just been a temporary problem, a glitch in an otherwise functional system. Or maybe the system had been broken all along and it took someone like Michelle to expose it. Maybe the HOA had always been too powerful, too opaque, too willing to prioritize rules over people. Maybe the only difference now was that people were paying attention. I did not have the answer. I just knew that I was not going to be silent anymore. If the HOA ever tried to pull something like this again, I would fight. And so would Ron, and Erica, and Mark, and dozens of others. We had built a network. We had built a culture of accountability. And that was not going away. I parked in my driveway and looked at my house. It was a small house, nothing special. But it was mine. And no one was going to take it from me with fake fees or bogus violations or weaponized rules. I grabbed my mail and went inside. There was a letter from the HOA. I opened it carefully. It was a notice about the quarterly meeting. The agenda included budget review, landscaping proposals, and a discussion about dock assignments. It was all normal stuff. No threats, no violations, no fines. I put the letter on the counter next to the yellow ruler and made dinner. Life went on. The HOA conflict was over. Michelle was in prison. The fees were refunded. The rules were fixed. Justice had been served. But I kept the ruler. I kept it as a reminder that the fight is never really over. Systems can always be abused. Power can always corrupt. Silence can always enable harm. The only thing that stops it is people willing to stand up and say no. People willing to document. People willing to organize. People willing to fight. And I had fought. We had all fought. and we had won. That was enough.